It seems to me like today can be used as a model for all of our life upon this earth. If we're paying close attention, which I hope all of you are getting that hint by now, we are proclaiming Christ is risen already, very strongly. Tonight it will be proclaimed to the universe. It won't just be this hidden group of people like it was before the apostles had to go out into the world. But that proper and right tension is there for the spiritual life, that narrow gate, that middle way that is hard to find for us. Because as many of the fathers have loved to always express, I know we moderns like to think of Father Alexander Schmemann of speaking of bright sorrow, but John Climacus speaks of it very diligently as well, much, much earlier. It is the way we are supposed to live, with a strong sobriety throughout our life. But sobriety does not mean walking around looking like life is miserable by any stretch of the imagination. It is a life that does not draw attention to ourselves. It draws attention to Christ. To be joyful, as I spoke about on Palm Sunday, is not to be jocular and backslapping and telling everyone jokes constantly. It's time for well-placed humor. To proclaim Christ, what more joyful could there be than the proclamation of Christ? So we live in this tension of this day, as all of us right now, but really we're in a state of abstinence from food and living a spiritual life, and hopefully from distractions, are prepared in prayer, are focused on the one thing needful. Everything is really narrowing to that point at this point today. Yes, many of us have ideas right now about what we want to break the fast with, and that's okay. Those are given by God too. But focus first on the spiritual feast that is at hand, and the reception of the body and blood of Christ, which is the true Paschal Lamb that breaks the fast in the holy mysteries that we receive in the Eucharist this evening, or tomorrow morning actually, the 8th day. We think of the saints of Seraphim of Sarof. We always love to focus on him walking around wearing white and saying, Christ is risen, and calling everyone by joy, and that is absolutely true about Saint Seraphim of Sarof. But Saint Seraphim also talked about those 1,000 days and 1,000 nights kneeling on a rock and feeling the flames of hell crackling around him. One does not come without the other. We have to live a sober and prayerful and ascetic spiritual life, denying ourselves in the ways of the world. We love to speak about all the fun stories of St. John Maximovich, but we also remember that in his dying days he was taken by his own church to court. Suffered greatly, people spitting upon him in the streets, but yet he was always radiant and full of joy and love for those around him. I think particularly, and it just came to mind right now, of Nikolai Velimirovich, when he was cast into Dachau for several years. Yes, Christians were cast into these camps as well. A Serbian bishop. They did not like Nikolai Velimirovich because he spoke out very strongly. This is the same Nikolai that proposed at St. Tikhon's as a teacher, by the way. And St. Nikolai, they would mock him and mock him and mock him. And one night as they came over to St. Nikolai, he had expressed in one of his writings that if he was praying in Dachau, his soul would be lifted up to the third heaven. It became so powerful that he had to pray to be brought back down again because he couldn't bear that much radiance at that point in this earthly life. But one day the soldiers, the SS soldiers, come up mocking and say, "Okay, Bishop, do you still believe in your Christ?" And St. Nikolai, in the midst of this suffering, Holy Saturday, we still think Christ is in the tomb. We have an advantage on those who went before us. Looked at them around and turned around and said, "No." And they began laughing. And with flames in his eyes, he says, "I know him." There's a big difference in just believing and really knowing God. St. Nikolai knew God. And we have the opportunity today in opening our hearts in sobriety of life and living this way throughout our lives. There's no reason why even on festal days we can't be more frugal in what we eat and in the distractions we give ourselves. we must still fill up our lives with the feast, which is really the only feast, and the only worthwhile distraction is worship of the Most Holy Trinity. To unite ourselves to Christ in this life, that we might find Him in the next. To know God truly, not just by Father Cyprian's words, or Father Dimitri, or Father Peter's words, or by something we read, but by direct experience ourselves in the spiritual life. And it becomes that great earthquake which shattered the tomb, shatters our hearts open. In that earthquake, the light of Christ descends upon our hearts, and Christ is risen in our hearts, and we become new and radiant creations of God. May God grant us to embrace the mystery that is this day, to live in this way all the days of our life, that we might have that tension of this incredible joy bursting within us, but with sobriety of the realization that we have fallen so short of being worthy of that radiance. That God in His mercy, as we heard hell cried out groaning, descended into Hades to find us there and to yank us out and to capture Satan and all his minions and give us power over heaven and earth by His glorious resurrection. Amen.
Amen.